Get your thoughts. I wrote down 4 things as I listened to the prosecutor.
I'm anxious to hear, seriously.
I wrote down overly melodramatic.
Yep.
Kind of sounded like a frustrated dime novelist.
Yep.
Second of all, quite repetitive.
Yes.
Third, he underscored a lot of irrelevant details. And number 4, I think it was a huge mistake. He highlighted the prosecution's biggest weakness, that nobody can really tell what happened out there. Well, if that's the case, if nobody knows what happened that night, that equals reasonable doubt. But let's talk about these. Doug, let me start with you. It was pretty melodramatic.
Well, first of all, he came right out of the gate with a curse, and I've never seen that.
Right. You run a risk.
Yes, you run a risk of, alienation and so on. But let me get to your points. He definitely went into some irrelevant material. I'll give an example. He said that this particular weapon requires more of a pressing. That's relevant when there's a dispute as to whether it's intentional or not. Here, the defense says he intentionally shot him, but he did it in self-defense. So that's irrelevant and not a smart move. And jurors are smart enough to pick up on that. The other thing is he came across, I'd be anxious to see what my colleague thinks, really a little overly sanctimonious and overly portraying the victim as this wonderful young kid playing video games and getting candy for his 12-year-old friend. Yeah. And then the defendant as this monster adult ogre, and I think he oversold it a little. Having said that, though, he looks like a prosecutor, very buttoned down, very direct, and so I'm not going to criticize his performance. I just think he oversold a couple of points.
Domenic, Romano, what did you think?
I thought he was very forceful. He was dramatic.
Right. Yes.
He certainly must have woken up the jury in the courtroom with his opening remark right off the bat. He tried to paint a contrast in the ages of the two parties. Trayvon Martin, I think he emphasized not even 30 days removed from his 17th birthday.
Right.
And also the physicality of the two. Mentioned that the defendant had been training quite a bit in the gym, kickboxing, mixed martial arts. So he tried to paint that picture, and I think he was appealing to the empathy of the jurors, clearly there.
No question about it. But, you want to micromanage a couple of sentences. If I heard it correctly, and I'm laughing, he said 30 days removed from his 16th year. What does that mean? What does that mean?
I thought I was reading a romance novel, a dime novel, kind of a cheap novel you read on the beach, because, the
dark,
the heat
stormy
of
night.
the bullet,
Yeah.
it was just a little over the top in that regard. On balance, I give him about a B.
I give him a B, yes.
Yeah.
Dominic?
What do you give him?
I give him a B+.
B+, all right. Here's one of the things.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
I mean, I want to read some reactions from our viewers, and this was sort of just reaction even before the opening statements began, just sort of predictions. Johnny Humble writes this: I expect the prosecution to paint Trayvon as the innocent picture of youth whose young life was snuffed out by a careless vigilante. And I would expect the defense to paint a picture of a concerned citizen who was forced to take a life in self-defense. Well, Johnny's right on the money, Johnny Humble.
That's very good, yeah.
Writing that about portraying Trayvon as an innocent kid. But, prosecutors, Doug, don't they have to be very, very careful? Because if they go too far, that allows then the defense, it opens the door to the defense to introduce Martin's, for example, past marijuana use, suspension from school, past fighting episodes. You got to be careful here.
Totally read my mind. And the point is, if you come on too strong with how wonderful and innocent he is, apropos of that pretrial in limine ruling about suspensions from school,
guns,
marijuana, talking about guns, this jury's going to be a little bit taken aback, like, wow, you weren't honest with us. A big dynamic is your credibility with the jury.
That's true, but that's also open to the other side. I understand there were some restraining orders involved with the defendant and certain situations in his relationships. And something you mentioned before, you said you were surprised that the prosecution's opening mentioned that no one saw a complete picture of the incident, which you would think is a perfect point for the defense.
I wouldn't say that if I'm the prosecutor.
However, what they're going to do, it's going to come out anyway, that no one had a complete picture of this.
Right. He had to say
They're
that,
trying to underscore the contradictions in the statements of the defendants, so that all of these people saw different things.
It was, and I've said it before, a dark and rainy night. There are very few witnesses, and none of them see everything completely, and some just see fleeting moments, and they tend to contradict each other. But again, in the end, if the jurors get back during deliberations and they kind of shake their heads or scratch their heads and say, I can't figure out what happened because this guy said this guy said that, I mean, that's reasonable doubt.
You are formulating what I have described as a tie goes to the runner baseball analogy to a trial, and that is that if they really... Let's assume that just as effective as the prosecutor was, and we gave him B's and B pluses, in portraying this vigilante against an unarmed young kid, let's assume that the defense gets up and is equally compelling in saying his head was being repeatedly smashed into the concrete, he was legitimately in fear of grave injury. If it's a tie, then it goes to the defendant.
Yeah.
I think.
Certainly the onus is on the prosecution.
Right.
However, isn't it interesting, this point about there being no blood, not just on his hands, but even the fingernail analysis. So if there was this altercation, how can it be that there's no blood on
whose hands?
On Trayvon Martin's hands.
Right.
They did say there was blood on his midsection.
Yes.
But Dominic's point is a good point, and I would posit the question, if he's smashing his head, I don't know what you think, into the concrete and there's blood, it might be on his hands, you would think. Well,
it depends on where his hands are.
Right. No, that's true.
You know, look, if the blood is gushing from the back of the head, it's going to be mostly on the concrete, not on the front of his face. And when you look at the pictures, there's very little blood on the front of his face. I'm not sure there's much of his own blood elsewhere on the front side. It's the back side.
And also, just in the format of a debate, as it were, between us, the point is, they may not have been in the type of struggle that results in the fingernail thing, which is more of a, visceral one-on-one. It's hard to say. I don't know. But I think that they're going to micromanage the timeline intensely, you know what I mean? And they're going to micromanage the nature of the physical encounter. And it's really going to be tricky and confusing, as you were highlighting, Domenic, in terms of, no blood, no fingernails. It's going to be interesting.